When I collapsed at work, my son ignored me, but my daughter-in-law posted finally, a day without the drama queen. One call later, I sold what they thought was theirs. When I collapsed at work, the doctors called my son Brandon. He never came, but my daughter-in-law Tiffany posted a family photo with the caption, finally, a day without the drama queen. So I made one call and sold something they thought was theirs. Who's dramatic now? The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed like angry insects as I scrolled through Facebook from my gurney. Heart palpitations, the doctor had said, stress-induced. At 63, apparently my body had decided it was done pretending everything was fine. The notification popped up on my phone just as a nurse checked my phone. Tiffany had tagged me in a photo. How thoughtful of my daughter-in-law to remember me during my medical emergency. I tapped the screen, expecting maybe a get well message. Instead, I found a perfectly staged family dinner photo. Brandon, my son, grinning at the head of my old dining table. Tiffany, radiant in the chair I used to occupy. 10-year-old Emma, my granddaughter, laughing at something off camera. They were in my house, well, technically their house now, enjoying what looked like an elaborate homemade lasagna dinner. The caption made my chest tighten worse than any heart palpitation. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Family dinner is so much more peaceful. #blessed, #family, #drama-free dinner, 47 likes already. My sister-in-law Carol had even commented with laugh-crying emojis. I stared at that phone screen for a full minute, letting the reality sink in. While I was lying in an emergency room, alone, they were celebrating my absence. Not worried, not concerned, celebrating. The nurse returned with discharge papers. Your son is coming to pick you up, right? I looked at the timestamp on Tiffany's post. 20 minutes ago, right around when the hospital would have called Brandon. He knew exactly where I was. He'd chosen the family dinner instead. Actually, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, I'll call an Uber. As I waited in the hospital lobby, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I called my real estate agent. Margaret, it's Sushila Wilson. Remember that house on Elm Street you said would sell in a week? I'm ready to list it. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this mess. 3 years ago, I thought I was being the perfect mother. Turns out I was actually being the perfect fool. Like most stories about family betrayal, it started with good intentions and ended with me learning exactly what I was worth to the people I'd loved most. It began right after Robert's funeral. My husband of 35 years had left me the house, his life insurance, and enough savings to live comfortably. I was 60, recently widowed, and suddenly very alone in a 4-bedroom house that felt cavernous without his laughter filling the rooms. Brandon had been so attentive during those first weeks. He'd stop by daily, sometimes with Tiffany and Emma, bringing groceries from Whole Foods and checking on me. Mom, you shouldn't be rattling around in this big house all by yourself, he'd said one evening as we sat on the front porch. It's not healthy. Tiffany nodded sympathetically. All those memories everywhere. It must be so hard. I'd appreciated their concern. The house did feel overwhelming some days. What if, Brandon continued, we moved in here temporarily, just until you decide what you want to do long-term? Emma could have the stability of staying in her school district, and you wouldn't be alone. The idea seemed perfect. I'd downsize to a small apartment nearby, let them take care of the house, and still have my family close. It would just be temporary, Tiffany assured me. Until we can save enough for our own place. Maybe a year at most. I should have suspected something when Brandon immediately started talking about property taxes and maintenance costs. How the house was such a financial burden for me on a fixed income. Never mind that Robert's insurance and investments meant I was hardly struggling financially. Within 6 months, they'd moved in completely. I'd rented a 1-bedroom apartment across town, paying monthly rent while they lived mortgage-free in the house Robert and I had spent decades paying off. But here's what I didn't know then, they'd been planning this from the start. While I grieved, they'd been systematically redirecting my mail to their new address to help manage my affairs. Bank statements, credit card offers, investment notices, everything started going to my old house where they could screen what I saw. Just temporarily, became 2 years, then 3. Every time I mentioned them moving out, there was a new crisis. Brandon's job at the marketing firm was unstable. Tiffany was pregnant, false alarm, but they'd already planned the nursery. Emma was struggling with middle school transitions. I started to feel like an intruder in my own former home. Visits became awkward. My belongings disappeared into storage or donation piles. They updated the decor, painting over wallpaper Robert and I had chosen together. But the worst part wasn't losing the house. It was becoming invisible in my own family's life. Margaret Henderson answered on the first ring. At 70, she'd been selling houses longer than most real estate agents had been alive, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Sushila, I was wondering when you'd come to your senses about that property. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? I want it listed immediately. How immediately are we talking? Because that house will have offers within days, but we need proper preparation. I thought about Tiffany's social media post, probably getting more likes by the minute. How fast can you get the paperwork ready? Margaret laughed, the sound sharp with approval. That's the Sushila I remember from the PTA fundraising wars. But honey, even with rush processing, we're looking at standard disclosure periods, 30 days minimum for closing, assuming cash buyers. Reality hit me. This wasn't going to be the dramatic same-day eviction I'd fantasized about. But maybe that was better. Better meant more thorough. Fine. But Margaret, I need complete discretion until we're ready to list, and I need to understand my legal position. Smart woman. I'll bring my attorney friend, Patricia Morgan. She specializes in family property disputes. The next morning, Margaret arrived at my small apartment with Patricia, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who radiated competence. Sushila, Patricia began, spreading documents across my tiny kitchen table. Before we proceed, I need to understand the living arrangement. Was there any formal lease agreement? Any documented rent payments? No, it was just family helping family. Patricia exchanged a look with Margaret. That's both good and bad news. Good because you retain full ownership rights. Bad because they might try to claim tenant protections or even adverse possession after 3 years of continuous occupancy. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. What does that mean? It means we need to be very careful about how we handle the eviction process. And Sushila, you need to know, they will likely try to fight this legally. Margaret pulled out a thick folder. There's something else we need to discuss. I did some preliminary research on your property. The tax records show several liens were filed and released in the past 18 months. Did you know about those? I stared at her. What kind of liens? Home improvement loans, primarily. All properly documented and paid off, but it suggests significant borrowing against the property's equity. The room started spinning. I never authorized any home improvement loans. Patricia leaned forward. Sushila, when did you last check your credit report? I don't remember. Maybe 2 years ago. We need to pull your credit report immediately. If they've been intercepting your mail, there could be financial activity you're unaware of. The phone started ringing at 7:23 a.m. Brandon's name flashed on the screen with the persistence of a smoke alarm. I let it go to voicemail while I made my morning coffee, the good stuff I'd bought myself for the first time in months, Starbucks Pike Place roast that didn't require justifying the expense to anyone. The voicemail was everything I expected. Mom, we need to talk. There's some crazy woman calling about listing the house. Obviously, there's been a mistake. Call me back immediately. Obviously, there's been a mistake. As if the very idea of me making a decision without consulting him first was impossible to comprehend. The phone rang again before I'd finished listening to his message. This time it was Tiffany. I answered on the 4th ring. Good morning, Tiffany. Sushila, what the hell is going on? Some real estate agent called Brandon saying she's our listing agent now. This has to be some kind of scam. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. Actually, Margaret Henderson is my listing agent. She's been in business for 30 years, so I'd hardly call her a scammer. Your listing agent? Tiffany's voice climbed an octave. What are you talking about? You don't own the house anymore. We've been living here for 3 years. Living there, yes. Owning it, no. The deed is still in my name, Tiffany. It always has been. More silence. But this one had a different quality. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her brain. But we've been maintaining it. We've put money into improvements. We painted the whole upstairs. With paint I paid for, I reminded her, along with the new washing machine, the roof repair, and every utility bill for the past 3 years. Brandon's voice came through the speaker. Apparently, I was on speakerphone now. Mom, this is insane. You can't just sell our home out from under us. Our home. That phrase hit like a physical slap. It stopped being our home when you started celebrating my absence on social media. What are you talking about? Finally, a day without the drama queen. Ring any bells? Posted while I was in the emergency room yesterday, by the way. But don't worry, I saw the photo. You all looked very happy to be rid of me. The line went quiet. In the background, I could hear Emma asking someone to help her find her backpack for school. When Brandon finally spoke, his voice had lost its indignant edge. Mom, that post wasn't about you. Of course it wasn't. Just like all those times you've been too busy to return my calls weren't about me either. Just like forgetting my birthday last month wasn't about me. We didn't forget your birthday. You wished me happy birthday on Facebook 2 days late, which is about the level of effort I've come to expect. But here's what really bothered me. Patricia's credit report findings from yesterday were far worse than I'd let on. While they'd been playing house with my property, they'd also been playing bank with my identity. Brandon, I said carefully, we need to have a very serious conversation about finances. In person. Today. His voice became wary. What kind of conversation? The kind where you explain the $75,000 home equity loan taken out in my name 6 months ago. After hanging up on Brandon and Tiffany, I did something I should have done years ago. I started making a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but an accounting. Every dismissed phone call, every cancelled dinner plan, every time I'd been made to feel like an inconvenience in their perfectly curated family life. The notebook filled up faster than I expected. February 2024, asked Brandon to help move furniture in my apartment. He said he was busy with work, but posted photos from a weekend ski trip to Vail the same day. January 2024, invited to Emma's school play. Tiffany forgot to save me a seat. I stood in the back while strangers sat in empty chairs. December 2023, Christmas morning at their house. I brought gifts for everyone. They gave me a scented candle from CVS clearance rack. Still had the markdown sticker on it. But it was the things I found online that really opened my eyes. While going through 3 years of social media posts, something I'd never bothered to do before, I discovered a pattern that made my stomach turn. Tiffany's Instagram was like a highlight reel of family happiness. Hundreds of photos of Brandon and Emma, family vacations I'd never heard about, dinner parties I'd never been invited to, birthday celebrations where I was conspicuously absent. But the comments were what really got to me. Under a photo of them at some fancy steakhouse, "Where's Brandon's mom?" asked a family friend. Tiffany's response, "Oh, she's not really a social person anymore. Prefers to stay home." Under a Christmas morning photo, "Lovely family. Just the 3 of you." Tiffany again, "Brandon's mother is going through some things. We're giving her space to figure herself out." Going through some things. Figuring myself out. Like I was having some kind of breakdown instead of just being systematically excluded from their lives. But the worst one was under a photo from Emma's 10th birthday party last month, a party I'd known nothing about until I saw the pictures online. Someone asked, "Did Grandma Sushila make it?" Brandon had responded this time, "Mom's gotten really demanding lately about attention and involvement. We decided it was better to keep things small and stress-free for Emma's sake." Demanding about attention and involvement. In my granddaughter's birthday party. I stared at that comment for a full 10 minutes, letting the words rearrange everything I thought I knew about the past 3 years. They hadn't been protecting me from an empty house. They'd been protecting themselves from me. I wasn't the grieving widow who needed space and support. I was the inconvenient obligation they had to manage. But Patricia's findings from the credit report were still haunting me. The home equity loan was just the beginning. There were credit cards I'd never opened, personal loans I'd never signed for, and purchase patterns that painted a picture of people living far beyond any means I was providing them. The revelation that shattered everything came at 2:47 a.m. when I couldn't sleep and decided to follow Patricia's advice about monitoring my financial accounts online. What I found made the heart palpitations from 2 days ago feel like a gentle flutter. The home equity loan was $75,000. Not the small improvement loan I'd been imagining. But that was nothing compared to the rest. 3 credit cards I'd never opened, each with limits between $15,000 and $20,000. A personal loan for $30,000 that I definitely hadn't signed for. Store cards, gas cards, even a jewelry store credit account. All of them showing my address as the house on Elm Street. All of them current and in good standing, with payments being made from an account linked to that address. An account I'd never opened. The phone number listed on every single account was Brandon's cell phone. With shaking hands, I pulled up the detailed statements I could access online. The charges painted a picture of a lifestyle I'd unknowingly been funding for over 18 months. Tiffany's yoga studio membership at Core Power, $200 monthly. Brandon's gym and personal trainer at Equinox, $350 monthly. Emma's private tennis lessons at the country club, $400 monthly. Lessons she'd never mentioned taking. Restaurants I'd never heard of, the Capitol Grill, Morton Steakhouse, thousands of dollars monthly. Designer clothing purchases from Nordstrom and Saks. Spa treatments at luxury resorts. Weekend getaways. And then I found the vacation charges from December 2023. $8,000 to a resort in Cancun, charged while I'd spent Christmas alone because they were keeping things low-key that year. But it was the most recent charge that made me physically sick. A jewelry store purchase for $3,200 made the day I was in the hospital. While I was lying on a gurney with chest pains, Brandon had been buying jewelry. The paper trail showed they'd been systematically stealing my identity for 18 months. But the mail redirection had been going on for 3 years, since right after Robert's funeral, when they'd helped me by having important documents sent to their address so I wouldn't be overwhelmed by paperwork while grieving. Every bank statement, every credit card offer, every financial communication had been intercepted and screened. They'd been curating what I saw while living off fraudulent accounts opened in my name. I printed everything. Every statement, every charge, every forged signature that somehow passed for mine. By 5 a.m., I had a folder thick enough to choke a horse, all documenting how my son and daughter-in-law had been systematically stealing from me while making me feel grateful for their attention. But there was something else in the credit report that made my blood run cold. Inquiries. Multiple inquiries from attorneys' offices, financial institutions, and something called Elder Care Assessment Services. They hadn't just been stealing from me. They'd been building a case. Margaret arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with coffee and Patricia Morgan. "Sushila," Margaret said, taking one look at my face, "what did you find?" I handed Patricia the folder. Apparently I've been funding their lifestyle for 18 months without knowing it. But there's more. Patricia flipped through the documents with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this before. Identity theft, credit fraud, forgery. "Sushila, this is criminal. But these inquiry patterns suggest something else entirely." What kind of something else? They've been consulting with elder law attorneys and financial advisors. This looks like preparation for a conservatorship case. The room started spinning. They were planning to have me declared incompetent? The timeline suggests yes. The mail redirection, the financial fraud, the social isolation, it's a textbook pattern for financial elder abuse leading to guardianship proceedings. Margaret nodded grimly. The house sale just became a lot more urgent, honey. But even more urgent is filing criminal charges. If we don't move fast, they might accelerate their timeline. I looked at both women. How fast can we get the house listed and get criminal charges filed? Patricia smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. How does today sound for the charges and tomorrow for the listing? They escalated faster than I expected. By noon, Emma was standing at my apartment door, tears streaming down her face, holding a suitcase. "Grandma Sushila, please don't make us homeless. Mom says we'll have to live in our car." My heart shattered. Using my 10-year-old granddaughter as an emotional weapon was a new low, even for them. "Sweetheart, come inside." I guided her to my small couch, noting how her parents had stayed in the car, close enough to coach her, far enough away to maintain plausible deniability. "They sent you here alone?" I asked gently. Emma nodded, fresh tears spilling. "Mom packed my bag and said I should stay with you since you're making us move out. She said maybe if I talked to you, you'd remember that family is supposed to take care of each other." The manipulation was so blatant it was almost insulting. Almost. Emma, honey, did your parents explain why I'm selling the house? She shook her head. They just said you changed your mind about letting us live there. That you don't want us to be happy anymore. I sat down beside her, choosing my words carefully. Do you remember 3 years ago when Grandpa Robert died and your family moved into our house? Yeah. To take care of it while you figured out what you wanted to do. That's right. It was supposed to be temporary. But what if I told you that in all this time, your parents never once looked for their own place? Never saved money to move out. Instead, they've been using my name to borrow money for things like vacations and expensive purchases that you never got to enjoy. Emma's face scrunched in confusion. But Dad said we couldn't afford our own house because his job doesn't pay enough. Then maybe they shouldn't have spent $8,000 on a trip to Cancun last Christmas. Her eyes widened. We didn't go to Cancun. My blood ran cold. What did you do for Christmas, sweetheart? I stayed with my friend Ashley's family for a week. Mom and Dad said they had to go help sick relatives, but they couldn't take me because I might catch something. They'd abandoned their 10-year-old daughter with friends while they vacationed in Mexico on stolen money. These weren't just thieves. They were neglectful parents. Emma, you're not going to be homeless. I promise you that. But I can't let your parents keep using my name to borrow money for things that don't benefit you at all. 3 weeks later, Patricia Morgan's office felt like a war room. Legal documents covered every surface, and she'd assembled what looked like a small army of associates to handle the multiple cases we were now pursuing. The good news, she said, adjusting her reading glasses, is that your son and daughter-in-law left a paper trail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. The bad news is that this level of systematic fraud suggests they've been planning this for much longer than we initially thought. The criminal proceedings finally concluded 18 months later. Brandon pled guilty to identity theft, fraud and elder abuse in exchange for 2 years in prison and full restitution of $127,000, the total amount stolen once investigators traced all the fraudulent accounts. Tiffany received 18 months of community service after her attorney argued she was following Brandon's lead, though that argument became less convincing when we discovered evidence of similar patterns in her family history. Now I'm sitting on the deck of my new house in Asheville, North Carolina, watching my granddaughter build a treehouse with the neighbor's kids. Emma lives with me permanently now. The custody hearing revealed that Brandon and Tiffany had left her with friends or relatives for extended periods on at least 6 occasions, including multiple weekend trips funded by fraudulent credit cards. She's thriving here. New school, new friends, and most importantly, adults who don't lie to her or use her as a manipulation tool against other family members. Sometimes people ask if I regret how everything turned out, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is simple. I regret that it took me 3 years to recognize what was happening. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret refusing to accept their narrative that I was dramatic, demanding, or incompetent. What I have now is something I'd forgotten was possible: peace without apology. Real peace, not the fake kind that comes from avoiding conflict at any cost, but the deep satisfaction of knowing I refuse to be anyone's victim. As I finish writing this, Emma calls me over to see her treehouse progress. She's hammered a sign over the entrance that reads, Sushila and Emma's Clubhouse. No drama queens allowed. Smart kid. She learned early that the people who call you dramatic are usually the ones creating all the drama.